Chapter 5. Feelings are signals, not instructions. One of the most consequential confusions in modern life may be the tendency to treat feelings as commands rather than information. Human beings often experience emotions as though they arrive carrying truth already embedded within them. Anger feels like proof. Fear feels like certainty. Desire feels like destiny. Resentment feels like moral clarity. Attraction feels like meaning. Anxiety feels like danger. Emotional intensity itself often becomes mistaken for accuracy. But emotions are not objective descriptions of reality. They are signals. Important signals, certainly. Sometimes profoundly important. Human beings would not survive without emotional systems rapidly alerting them to potential danger, reward, social threat, opportunity, attachment disruption, or environmental change. Emotions evolved because they helped organisms respond quickly under conditions where lengthy rational analysis would often arrive too late. The problem is not emotion itself. The problem is unconscious obedience to emotion. Most people rarely pause long enough to examine the distinction. A feeling arises and immediately begins shaping perception, interpretation, memory, and behavior. The body reacts before reflection enters. The mind then often begins constructing explanations afterward, rationalizing emotional conclusions already reached beneath awareness. This process happens constantly. A person feels insulted and immediately assumes malicious intent. Another feels anxious and interprets uncertainty as catastrophe. Someone experiences attraction and begins projecting depth, destiny, or compatibility onto another person long before truly knowing them. Political outrage floods the nervous system and complex issues collapse into emotionally satisfying moral simplicity. In each case, emotion is functioning less as signal and more as instruction. The individual does not merely feel anger or fear or desire. They become possessed by it. This is one reason emotionally charged environments are so psychologically powerful. Emotional states alter cognition itself. Fear narrows perception. Anger simplifies complexity. Shame distorts self-evaluation. Desire selectively amplifies rewarding information while minimizing risk. Group emotion spreads socially through mimicry and reinforcement. Entire crowds can become emotionally synchronized before individuals fully realize what is happening inside themselves. And because emotional reactions often feel immediate and authentic, people tend to trust them deeply. Trust yourself, modern culture frequently says, but this advice becomes dangerous when people have not first learned to distinguish between intuition and compulsion, wisdom and emotional conditioning, genuine values and reactive impulses, present reality, and inherited emotional patterning. Not every feeling deserves obedience simply because it feels sincere. Some emotions reflect accurate perception. Others reflect old wounds, tribal conditioning, status anxiety, attachment insecurity, hormonal states, exhaustion, projection, fear, or inherited survival strategies that may no longer fit present reality. A person who learned in childhood that rejection was emotionally dangerous may experience ordinary disagreement as profound threat. Another who learned that vulnerability leads to pain may interpret intimacy itself as danger. Someone whose identity is fused with a political tribe may experience opposing viewpoints not as intellectual disagreement, but as moral contamination. The emotional experience feels real because it is real. But the interpretation attached to the feeling may still be distorted. This distinction is critical. The goal of the examined life is not emotional suppression. Human beings are not healthier when detached from emotion entirely. Emotions often contain valuable information about needs, values, fears, boundaries, attachment, meaning, and perception. The problem arises when emotion bypasses reflection completely. A feeling can contain information without containing instruction. Fear may say, "Pay attention." It does not always mean retreat. Anger may say, "Something feels violated." It does not always mean attack. Anxiety may say, "Uncertainty is present." It does not always mean catastrophe is imminent. Desire may say, "This matters to you." It does not always mean this will fulfill you. This gap between emotional signal and conscious response may be one of the most important spaces human beings can learn to cultivate. Because inside that gap, reflection becomes possible. Without that gap, life becomes increasingly reactive. And reactive people are easily manipulated. Modern environments exploit this constantly. Media systems, political movements, advertising, social platforms, ideological tribes, outrage economies, and status-driven ecosystems all understand, whether consciously or not, that emotionally activated minds become easier to direct. Fear spreads quickly, moral outrage spreads quickly, envy spreads quickly, tribal identity spreads quickly. Emotional stimulation captures attention more effectively than careful reflection. A person constantly reacting emotionally often experiences themselves as highly engaged with reality while becoming increasingly disconnected from it. This is partly because emotions reorganize attention. They highlight certain information while obscuring other information. Anger searches for enemies. Anxiety searches for danger. Desire searches for gratification. Shame searches for threat to identity. Emotional states create selective perception. Human beings then frequently mistake this emotionally filtered perception for objective reality itself. Again, this does not make people foolish. It makes them human. Emotional systems evolve for survival and social coordination, not for detached philosophical objectivity. The nervous system prioritizes emotional relevance long before rational neutrality enters the scene. The examined life therefore requires learning how to relate to emotions differently. Not as enemies. Not as infallible guides, but as signals requiring interpretation. This shift changes something profound psychologically. A person who automatically obeys every emotion becomes increasingly controlled by emotional weather. Their inner state fluctuates constantly with stimulus, fear, outrage, validation, rejection, comparison, uncertainty, and desire. A person who learns to observe emotion before acting gains increasing self-possession. Not because emotions disappear, but because awareness enters the process. The person begins noticing when anger is masking fear, when certainty is emotionally motivated, when resentment protects wounded pride, when desire is socially borrowed, when anxiety reflects inherited conditioning more than present danger, when outrage is rewarding identity rather than serving truth, when emotional intensity is creating false certainty. This awareness introduces psychological freedom. Not freedom from feeling, freedom from automatic obedience to feeling. And perhaps this is one of the deepest shifts in the movement from the unexamined mind toward the examined one. The realization that emotions are part of consciousness, but not the entirety of consciousness. Signals, not sovereign rulers of the self.